Hello, 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 and welcome to Property Gamechangers Live on the Property Gamechangers Facebook page. And every week, join us in conversation with people who are changing the game in property. We're celebrating the power of ethical property investing to really change lives. We're debunking the myth that you need a lot of money to get started in property. And of course, we're inspiring each other to believe bigger, to be bolder, and to be game changers for good. And today's episode is phenomenal. We have got property game changer, the brilliant Bill McWilliam. He's a portfolio landlord with over 23 buy-to-let properties. He is a portfolio finance superhero. If you have got a lot of properties and you've got finance difficulties, which I'm sure you will have, he is your man. And he's also an expert in transferring your assets from limited company into limited company, rather, which can have many pitfalls. So, welcome, property game changer, Bill McWilliam. Hi, how are you, Bill?
I'm very well, thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Taylor.
Lovely to have you on the show. And I was just saying that it'll actually be really interesting for me to find out a lot more about you. Now, I have known you for some years,
Indeed,
and
yes.
you used to swan about in your Spider sports car
I
and
still, I still do. I still do.
say that you're full-time in property, and you used to try to explain to me before I got into property a few years ago. Um, you used to explain to me what you'd done, and I was none the wiser. So I'm hoping that this time I can actually make sense of it. So tell us, Bill, was there a moment that you decided to get started in property? For many people, there is.
Well, actually, I sort of drifted into property quite by accident. So back in 1995, so about 25 years ago, my sister, who owned a flat in Edinburgh, got a job down south, and she couldn't sell her flat quickly. And I suggested that I would take it off her and I would rent it out. So that was how I got started. Now, over the next 5 years, I acquired another two properties. Now, when I say acquired, the reason I use that term is that I had no plan. So people would come to me for various reasons and say, I have a property, I'm looking to get rid of it, would you be interested? And I took it. So I had this small portfolio of, to be quite honest, three rather undesirable properties in Edinburgh. So these properties were not in very good areas. The tenants I had were not very good. The only real positive about it all was that the cash flow was enormous. And I realized there must be something in this property thing. So it was actually on my birthday in 2000 that I was on holiday in Spain. And at the time I worked in a sales job, which for those of you that are in sales will know, often sales jobs are financially quite attractive, but they tend to be long hours, possibly working weekends, working evenings, and you don't get a great deal of time for yourself. And I just thought, I really need a change. So I was on the beach and I sat down with a very, very small piece of paper and I did a list of things that I could do that could possibly make me money. And it kept coming back to property. So I decided that when I returned back home, I would really focus on creating a proper structured property portfolio. And so that was how I got started.
Brilliant. So you went from there on a napkin, on holiday, I think you said?
Yes, yes.
Yes, you're on holiday on the back of a napkin. You've got the idea, I'm going to create a structured property portfolio. How did you go from there to actually doing it, Bill?
So over the next 6 months or so, I did a very detailed business plan, and what was based on the experience that I had on the three properties I already owned, and I decided exactly the type of properties that I wanted to own, the type of tenants I wanted to have, the almost exact locations of these properties, the age of property, basically every single detail I put into this business plan. Then obviously the next problem was to fund it. So at the time I lived in reasonable sized house that I no longer required. So I sold my house, sold the three properties that I was renting out, and also left my job at the same time and downsized my residential home and put the rest of the money into property. So that was where I got the money to start and started buying at the beginning of 2000.
Wow. So
Sorry, 2001. 2001.
2001. There are these turning points, aren't there, Bill, in life, where you could have carried on living in your bigger house that you didn't need, but you wouldn't be in this situation now. So if I could just ask you a question, of course, you don't have to answer any questions I ask you, but just I would be interested to know what capital you used to start out this new portfolio, if you're able to say. How much was it?
So at the time, after I sold the properties that I had and sold my house, after I bought another property, left me with about 70,000.
It's interesting. The reason I asked that is because somebody, Tej was on recently. He started off his now big portfolio. I mean, 15 properties in 15 months or something like that. But he started off with 40K. I know that somebody else started off with a similar amount. And many people will have that in equity. That they might be able to take this next step. So you started off with 60K, and tell us, what does a properly structured portfolio look like? What did you mean when you said that to yourself?
Well, I think in any type of business, you need to, I would say, box your business. So you need to decide for property business the type of properties that you want to rent out. So if you want to, do as I did and rent to professional couples, or you may prefer HMO properties, you may prefer holiday lets, but you need to decide the type of business that you want to have. For me, I realised that location was important. I personally want all my properties to be within basically half an hour's drive from my home, so that should anything happen, I can deal with it personally. I want them all to be in the same location because I felt it would be easier in terms of tradespeople, letting agents if I was going to use them, these sort of things. Also, I decided that the properties I wanted were to be relatively modern, so built after about 1980, just because a lot of the older properties have a lot of conversions and you don't know what standard that's been done to.
That is great and very in depth, and you were able to take the experience that you had managing the three and pull your money out of there and your own resi and move into owning, start to build your portfolio. So tell us about the first step. You had your 70 grand, and how many properties did you buy to start off with?
So at the time, back in 2001, the property market, certainly here in Edinburgh, was absolutely booming, and it was actually very difficult to buy properties. So I bought the first property that I termed as being in my new portfolio, which was actually the one that I was going to live in, although later I did rent it out. So I bought that in January 2001. Then in March I bought the second property. Then there was a bit of a gap because it was just so hard to buy properties at the right price in Edinburgh. So I was very conscious. I didn't want to pay too much. So it took me till December to get the next one. And then early 2002, I got the third rental property.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just one thing I do want to pick up on, because a lot of people will think, well, I live in an expensive area, so I can't invest in property in this area. And actually, that's certainly true for you, because you're talking about Edinburgh. It's well known to be very expensive as far as property is concerned. However, we were just talking before we went on air about a property that you've just bought now during the lockdown. And I think people might be surprised about that. Do you want to tell us about it, Bill?
Yeah, so I wanted to, my financial year ended at the end of August. So I wanted to buy a property before the end of my financial year to save myself a bit of tax. So I've been looking around in Edinburgh for a while. I went to see quite a lot of properties and didn't get them. I went to view one that is close to the Scottish Parliament buildings, and I went to see it, and I was told by the seller or seller's agent that there were loads of viewings, loads of people interested, and they were expecting a price above the valuation.
Mm.
Um, so I waited a few weeks and nothing really happened. I then put in a very low offer. So the property was valued at 135,000. I put in an offer of 127.5, and they came back to me and said no, they didn't want my offer. They were hoping to get the valuation. Now the following week, another property went for sale in the same development. I went to see that and I put in an offer of 125 because this property wasn't quite as good. And they again rejected the offer. I then went back to the first people and said, well, I would consider a slightly higher offer, but not much higher. And we agreed on a price of 130,000, so 5,000 below the valuation.
And that's brilliant. And what I love is this is right in the centre of town. You're just on the back of Holyrood Park. It's a fantastic location in the old town. And when you know the area really well, you know what's going to rent. It's a great price to buy at, but it's also a great spot for someone to live. And what would be the rental on something like that, Bill?
I would guess we'd get about 725 for this one.
So, you know, really good on that price of property. Not as good as what you get in Newport, South Wales, but you know, it is Edinburgh. You're going to get a lot more capital appreciation likely. So talk to us about the mindset, Bill, because how did you go from like the mindset that most of us have, certainly I did, you've got a good job, you've got a good salary coming in, you've got a nice house, from there to sort of seeming to risk it all by refinancing were you cautious? Were you concerned? How did you get the mindset to do it?
Yeah, the mindset was very difficult. I'm sure a lot of people have experienced something similar. But when you work for a large organisation, then the sort of mindset within the organisation is that organisation is everything. And if you decide that you want to do something on your own, there's a lot of negativity about it, and there's a lot of terms, sort of derogatory terms people use about anyone who tries to start things on their own. Um, you know, things like a one-man band, which gives the impression that somebody who is doing something on their own rather than a big organisation is a bit useless and is probably destined to fail. And so I had to basically, take everything on myself and just deal with it myself.
Mm.
The thing that really motivated me was that I just didn't want to be doing the same thing, for the rest of my life. That you know, when you're working for a company, you know, often you've got to work long hours, and there's always this thing about holidays. That if you want to take a holiday from your company, you've got to write it on the holiday chart, and
Yeah.
then somebody else then comes and says, no, you can't have that week because I want to have that week, and there's a big sort of argument about it. And you just had no freedom to do anything at all. You're completely governed by the company that you're working for, and I just wanted to get out of that, and that was really my motivation. And I suppose I never really had any thoughts about failure. I had been doing it sort of part time for 5 years before, and I could
Mm.
see how it worked.
Mm.
So I didn't really I didn't really have any concerns about the business itself failing.
Mm.
I didn't actually have very high aspirations for the business either. All I wanted to do was match the salary that I was earning before.
I think that a lot of people can resonate with that. So you just got on with it, and then you got your beginner properties to start off with. I think you said three, or am I making that
Yeah,
up?
so I got three basically within the first year.
Yeah. And we're going to find out how you went on from there. Did you buy more properties first, or did you get into the finance side first? Because I know that you moved across.
Yeah, well, what actually happened was when I started to build my portfolio, and I did an enormous amount of research, and I
Mm.
basically researched everything that was possible, and I went to a lot of banks and a lot of mortgage brokers, and I explained what I was trying to do, and I was explaining about how I wanted to build a portfolio, and nobody really understood what I was on about.
Mm.
Banks and mortgage brokers were quite happy to provide a buy-to-let mortgage. So if you went to them and said, "Here's a property, can I get a mortgage on it, buy-to-let mortgage?" they could do that. But they had no understanding about how to fund a portfolio that was going to grow relatively quickly. And I got a bit sort of annoyed with the fact that nobody could understand what I thought was actually quite a simple concept.
Mm.
And so I thought, I researched it all myself. And I thought, if I need this service, other people must. So I went and did my mortgage exams. And in 2003, I set up as a mortgage broker specializing in the buy-to-let market. So that was really how that started.
Hmm. And what you've become expert in is the portfolio finance, isn't it? Tell us really about some of the challenges that you see some people are facing, and how you're able to help with that.
Yeah, so the mortgage market and the finance market is ever changing. So as most people watching this will know, that around 3 years ago, um, the government decided that they would change the taxing on buy-to-let properties, and you wouldn't get the same level of tax relief on mortgage interest. So it means that people who have particularly larger portfolios, or people that are already higher rate taxpayers, people that may have sort of high yielding properties, are having to pay considerably more tax than they did previously. So I can work with clients so they can transfer their portfolio from their own name into a limited company at the lowest possible cost. Now, most people believe that if you transfer your properties from your own name into a portfolio, there will be costs such as capital gains tax, and in England it's stamp duty, in Scotland it's LBTT, and but there are ways that these can be avoided. Now, it all depends on the person's individual situation, so it doesn't work for everyone. But I work with people, and I see how many costs we can avoid. We try and establish the cost of doing the transfer, and if it's cost effective, then I will help them refinance their properties to allow the transfer to take place.
Wow, it's great to have a specialist onto that, because it can be such a minefield. You don't want to end on the wrong side of it. You certainly don't want to be paying CGT on every property and so on. So I think that is where you add massive value. Just want to say hi to Mimi, who's watching and enjoying the show today. And let's go on to your at three properties. You've become a finance broker. How do you go, Bill, from 3 to 23?
Well, so I was very fortunate because at the time, as I said earlier, the property market in Edinburgh was booming. So these properties gained in value fairly quickly. So it's a concept, and to be honest, I thought I'd invented this. I thought I sort of reinvented the wheel when I discovered this. It's a concept called gearing. So basically, the way that gearing works is that if, for example, you had £100,000 and you invest it in one property, you would get perhaps £7,500 rental a year, and you may get £7,500 capital appreciation. But if, however, you took this £100,000 and put £25,000 down on four separate properties, you would get £7,500 per property, and you would also get the £7,500 capital appreciation on each property. So that would give you close to 60,000. So I sort of discovered this myself and thought I'd sort of reinvented the wheel. So basically, as soon as I got capital in my properties, I took the money out and reinvested in other properties. So in 2003, I refinanced the three properties I already owned and used that money that I raised to buy another three properties, which took me up to six. Then another 2 years later, I did the same thing again and took the six up to 12. And then I took the 12 up to 24 by 2008.
Wow, wow. And so obviously you've sold some and bought some other ones since then.
I have sold a few in recent years, yes.
Yeah, and you're now standing at 23. And these are, I mean, the numbers themselves don't mean anything, because 23 properties in Doncaster is different to 23 properties in Edinburgh. And some people might be buying multi-unit, and some people might be buying single unit. But I'm just a nosy person, so I'm curious to know, do you know what approximately your portfolio value is, Bill, at the moment?
Yeah, so at the moment, the portfolio value, I suppose it does include the home that I live in, is probably about 4.5 million.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'm also interested to ask you, because obviously after the 2008 crash, then there's more caution about, the percentage of leveraging. And what do you work to on that framework these days?
Back in sort of pre-2008, it was possible to get mortgages of 85% of the property value, even 90% of the property value.
Yeah.
Um, that figure went back to 75%.
Mhm.
It had only recently raised to 80% before COVID,
Mm,
but it's now gone back to 75%.
mm,
I think being realistic and, in hindsight, that is actually a sensible level to get to.
mm,
Once you get past, 75% towards the 80, 85%, there is the risk that any slight change to the property market can put you in a sort of tricky situation with the lenders.
mm, mm, mm,
I myself got into a situation after 2008 where, because my portfolio was highly geared, it was very difficult for me to refinance. And
mm,
because of that, I ended up in very high interest rates, which
mm,
limited my profit probably for about 5 or 6 years.
mm. And yeah, so, and what do you say about interest only or repayment?
Again, it's one of these things that it depends very much on your own situation.
Mm,
Um, I think things that come into that you need to look at are things like your age, your employment, what you want to really do for employment. So somebody who perhaps has a career that's got a limited lifespan, so perhaps they need to retire at 50. It may be worth them doing repayment mortgages, so that by the time they reach that sort of age, they'll have a portfolio of properties that are paid off and give them a good income.
mm,
Other people, might need the income as they go along, so
mm,
therefore go for interest only. One of
mm,
the advantages of interest only on a portfolio is the fact that you can claim the interest against tax. So
mm.
if you're paying down the properties every year, there's less interest to claim against tax.
Yeah, really interesting, Bill. I suppose we're sort of, my sister and I are latecomers to the party, and in we've been doing it now, or buying the properties for the last 3 years. We've got bought just over 1 million, but we're still in the early days. But we have got a mix between repayment and interest only, but that's because we're us being slightly older, shall we say. That having some on repayment really makes sense. And but Mimi is saying yes, she's getting some good insight, and thanks for sharing, Bill. And she's also asking Bill, what advice would you give in starting to build a portfolio in an expensive area like central London?
Well, I suppose the advice I would give anyone that is looking to build a portfolio, regardless of location, first of all, advice I'd say is, do it now. That I think if you speak to any experienced property investor and they say, what would you have done differently? I think most would say started earlier. So start as soon as you can. Again, a bit like the way that I started, I would do a relatively comprehensive business plan, deciding on the type of properties that you want and the type of tenants you're looking to have, how you're going to manage them, etc. Um, in an expensive area, generally, difficulty is that one is that you will need a relatively high deposit. The other thing is that, and it happens in Edinburgh quite a lot, if the property price is expensive, although there can be great capital growth, often the rental that you'll achieve is relatively low in relation to the property price. So it's trying to find a balance where you get good rental and affordable properties.
Mm,
I think, look, again, if you look at some of the big employers, perhaps universities, hospitals, etc., and find relatively good quality housing round about these. Generally, they're quite good value.
Great, great.
I hope
And
that.
also there are surprising pockets within these expensive areas. Like you wouldn't certainly the average price for a one bedroom flat in Edinburgh is way over £130,000. But if you find the right places that are in demand in great locations, but also have those lower price points, they exist in every area, including London. For example, for a while, certainly ex-council flats provided that sort of opportunity in lots of different kind of expensive areas. So, Bill, let's talk a little bit about how this has led you to live what some see as the sort of playboy lifestyle, uh, in terms of the sports cars and the holidays and so
Yes,
on.
yes, you do flatter me, Miss Taylor. Yeah, one of my big aims for getting into property wasn't actually financial. It was really for the freedom. As I said earlier, one thing that used to really frustrate me is this thing about, if you wanted to go on holiday, then you had to put it on the holiday sheet, etc., etc. And one of the great things about the way that I run my business is that although I do run various courses, etc., um, in Edinburgh, a lot of the time I don't need to physically be here. So I've tried to concentrate all the time that I need to physically be in Edinburgh into a 10-day period. And it gives me the freedom to travel whenever I want. I can work anywhere from anywhere in the world. So it's given me a lot more freedom to travel as I like.
Yeah,
Um, Again, having property does give you a much more flexible income. So at times, I may choose to invest a lot of what I earn back into property. At other times, I may choose to take the money out. So that's, I suppose part of it is the times I've taken money out, it has created this myth of my playboy lifestyle. It's not always been like that.
yeah, no, it's been really lovely, and we met going on these walking weekends. Although that, but you also go on ones where you go and watch the Grand Prix and things.
Well, I was actually planning to go to the Monaco Grand Prix this year. Unfortunately, that was cancelled due to COVID, so unfortunately that plan failed.
Yes, and I was delighted to see that you're now back in Edinburgh because very recently you were holidaying um, somewhere quite irritating.
Yes, it was. I just actually returned from Venice on Sunday. Um, yeah, one of the great things about travel at the moment, again, having the flexibility to travel when you want. Um, at the moment, I'm able to travel to places like Venice that are now quiet. Now, there's always the risk that the flights may be cancelled or Italy will go into lockdown. But again, because of the flexibility of my lifestyle, if that happened, it wouldn't be a big problem for me. I could just rebook for another time.
Yeah, yeah. Mimi's saying, who asked about starting off in central London, she's looking at ex-local authority, and thank you very much, Bill. Carol is joining us and just saying hello. And we've also got Mo who's joined us and said hello. Hello to you all ladies today. Oh,
Hi,
and somebody else is saying hello, but we can't see your name, so do put your name in the comments if you get the opportunity. So, Bill, we've talked about what you've done. We've talked about some of your specialisms. We've talked about what this has afforded you in lifestyle. But I also know that one of the great things about this business is you get to share that with other people. And I know you've been doing some great works and won prizes and awards for the Prince's Trust. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'll try and explain a bit of the background about the Prince Trust. Although you probably are not aware of this, Miss Taylor, um, it was actually down to you that I got involved in the Prince's Trust. Now, you may not be fully aware of this,
No.
but many years ago, probably about 2008, 2007, 2008, um, I was at a dinner that you organised and was sitting next to somebody who was involved with the Prince's Trust.
No.
And they suggested that I got involved. So around about 2007, 2008, I got involved in a very low-key way, helping mentor people that were starting their own businesses. Now, as everyone's aware, around about 2009, 2010, there was this enormous financial crisis that really impacted on property investors and the finance market. And I found myself in a situation in 2011 where I was sitting at home and really had nothing to do. I'd been very, very busy for the previous 10 years. And suddenly, all the work that I was doing had gone. And I was getting a bit frustrated with the fact I was doing nothing. And I thought, well, what can I do? So I went down to the local Prince's Trust office and I said, look, I've been helping in a low-key way for several years, but I've got a lot of time in my hands. Is there anything I can help with? And they went to brought out this big computer printout of the people that they were dealing with and said, well, you can start by phoning all of them. And I worked on a voluntary basis with the Prince Trust office in Edinburgh for the next 5 years. And I did sort of 2-3 days a week. And because of that, I met a lot of people. I eventually started running training courses for bookkeeping, for marketing, business planning. And it was great because I worked with young people, often from disadvantaged backgrounds, that did this just enormous variety of businesses. And it's quite surprising sometimes that a lot of the high street names that you actually know, one of them, for example, being Brewdog, they started with funding from Prince's Trust. Mm-hmm. So I went in and I just volunteered to help out. And through my work, I was awarded sort of Volunteer of the Year in 2011 in Scotland. So that was a big plus. And from that, I was invited down to Holyrood Palace to meet Prince Charles. So there was a few of us. So we met Prince Charles. Now, a few years later, and this is really just to demonstrate how taking one small step can lead to amazing things. So in 2016, it was the Prince's Trust's 40th anniversary, and as one of their, I suppose one of their most significant supporters in Edinburgh, I was invited down to the garden party at Buckingham Palace. And if I'm honest, because London's a long way from Edinburgh, I wasn't very sure if I should go. And but I phoned my sister who lives in London and said, look, I've been invited down to the palace to a garden party with Prince Charles. If I go, is it okay to stay at yours? And she said, well, what do you mean if you go? If Prince Charles invites you to a garden party, you go. And I'm like, okay, sister, I'm going. So I very belatedly sort of agreed to my invitation and said I'd coming along. And I got a call from the palace, and they said you had to put down if you're bringing a guest. And I thought, well, I didn't realize I could take a guest. And they said, yes, you can take a guest. So I said to my sister, look, since you're putting me up in London, do you want to come to the palace with me? So we went to the palace, and it was all very grand. We're all dressed up, and we went in through the big palace entrance. And there was a lot of people. There was probably, I'm guessing, 500 people there, maybe more. So we went to the palace, and I knew a lot of people that worked in Prince's Trust from Scotland. So I knew a lot of people there, and my sister didn't know many people. So I went to socialise and left her at the table. And when I came back, she was talking to this woman, and I thought, that's really good. She's met someone that she knows. And I said, who's this woman that you know? And she said, oh, it's Ronnie Wood's wife. And I thought, oh, that's good. I hope that is that a neighbour of yours. And she said, no, it's Ronnie Wood from the Rolling Stones. And Ronnie Wood came across, and he was sitting at the table next to us. So there's myself, my sister, Ronnie Wood, and his wife all sitting together. It's one of these sort of remarkable things. So just from that small step, I ended up meeting Ronnie Wood.
Yeah. Never mind, Prince Charles is out the window now. It's all about Ronnie Wood. No, you go from you met the Rolling Stones. One.
Yes.
No, it's a fantastic journey once you get on it, and it's unlikely, although not impossible, that you would get that for being a car salesman.
That's correct, yes.
People like to get burned out.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I like to ask people about is that has there been a book that's particularly inspired you on this path, Bill?
I think the book that really changed things for me was Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of the concepts in the book I sort of already had thought about, but the way it's described in the book makes, simplifies it. And if you look at things like the cash flow quadrant, then it makes it a lot simpler, and you understand the difference between being an owner of assets and being an employee. So, for example, working in a sales job, every month that in a sales job, you start at ground zero, and you have got to work away making sales to hopefully get a good income at the end. But regardless of how high your income is last month, when you start the new month, it starts again at zero. And should you leave the company, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to take your clients with you. In fact, most companies have got contracts to prevent that. Whereas if you have assets such as property, so when I rent out my properties, every month I get rental, and I don't have to do anything. Every couple of years, I've got to put in a new tenant and go through all the rigmarole of checking in tenants, checking out tenants. But basically, between these times, I just get income every month, and I don't really have to do anything for it. And it is it's a mindset that I'm sure a lot of people watching this will completely understand. But it's surprising how many people don't get it. The mindset that people are educated to have is that you get a job and you get a pay pack at the end of the month. And that is what people believe you should be doing. But if you can get away from that, it's just makes an enormous difference.
It does make an enormous difference because of the things that you've said, that you have those assets. You get the benefit over time, you get the compounding, you get the benefit of the leverage, you get the freedom, you get the excitement, you get the Rolling Stones. So you get a chance to make a real contribution, because the things that you have learned in building that portfolio is why you became so valuable to the Prince's Trust, in being able to pass on that knowledge to young people starting up their own business. And talking about all of that knowledge, Bill, I know that you have spiderproperties.com. That's SPYDER, the spiders that excite people, not the ones that scare them. Although maybe you can do both in your spider. So spiderproperties.com. Now, what sort of people would benefit especially from the knowledge that you have, Bill?
Well, the people that I try and help the most are people that are either starting out in building their portfolio or want to expand their portfolio. And it's my aim is to try and help them understand how to build a portfolio, and generally just how to build a business. Most businesses really are very similar in the way that they work. And there's lots of things that are important to every business. I say, I'm a great believer, as anyone who goes to my meetings in Edinburgh will know, of business plans, and having a proper business plan where you basically have written down every step of the way. Now, often the business plan varies in time, but I always feel if you don't have a plan for your journey, you're never going to get anywhere. So also understanding things like the finance side, and simple things like bookkeeping, etc. All the business skills that are needed. So these are people that I try and help us, just help them get started and understand how a business works and how to fund a portfolio.
I think that's especially of interest, how to fund a portfolio. how to use leverage to best effect, but not expose yourself to the risks on the other side. And having been through, 2008, and come out in one piece, the pros and the cons, and are able to help people structure their businesses in ways that they can take advantage of the leverage, but also remain secure should there be any further dips. Speaking of which, Bill, what are your thoughts on recent happenings? This Corona, we're unsure where the property market will go. It seems to be quite hot at the moment in many places. What's it like in Edinburgh at the moment, and what are your thoughts?
At the moment, the market in Edinburgh is very buoyant. I think there's obviously, there's a pent-up sort of demand for both people buying and selling. There's people who back in February, March were desperate to buy somewhere and weren't able to. People who were looking to sell weren't able to. I think over the next few months, things are going to quieten down a lot right throughout the country. I think as long as there's nervousness about the possibility of a second lockdown, etc., a nervousness about employment, I think a lot of people will just stay put. So very few people will want to sell their homes, and therefore that will limit the properties that are available to buy. I think due to that, the rental market will become very strong over the next few months. But there's a lot of uncertainty, or things like home working. Now, that may not come to pass. And if it does, that can change the location people will want to stay. So there's lots of things like that are very much sort of unknown at the moment. And we'll just have to wait and see how these all come out.
Great. So we've talked about a lot of things today, and it's been really interesting to speak to you. Is there anything that you'd like to say in closing that you feel, Stephanie hasn't asked me about this? Is there anything that you'd like to add as we close?
I think we've covered. I think we've really covered most things. Now, one of the things again that I don't think you are aware sort of the importance of your role in my life. But one of the things I discovered when I did work for myself, and because I'd always worked before that in big organisations, is that when I started working for myself, I did find myself very alone. I didn't know many people who ran their own businesses, so I got involved in a lot of property networking groups, and through that I got a lot of support, because before then there were times where I would question, am I doing the right thing here? Is this just a foolish thing to do? And when I found people that were doing the same thing and had the same issues as me, then that was a big help to moving myself forward. And I think round about maybe 2005, 2006, I had reached a sort of point of, I was a bit nervous about making things bigger. I mean, there is a thing where a lot of people limit themselves by how much they believe they're worth. I mean, I know that when I was working for large companies, and particularly in sales jobs, that we would put a limit of the income you could earn. So on a sales job, generally you get an on-target income. And we would keep that deliberately low, because if you put it too high, people thought, I'm not worth that. And it's the same thing in property, that when your income increases, people do think, wait a minute, maybe I'm making too much money here. And being with people who had been successful helped me realize that there is actually no limit. Now, the point where you come into it, Stephanie, is that one of the things that happened to me, because I've been working long hours, I had basically lost my entire social life. And one of the things that happened when I started doing property and working my own is that I also still had no social life. So although my business was relatively successful, my social life was a complete disaster. And it was through your own group at the time that you provided a social life for me, which is still very much a part of my life.
Yeah.
So it's all about keeping every part of your life in balance. So don't focus 100% on property and ignore your social life or your family or whatever. Try and keep everything in balance if you can. So I think that's really, one bit of advice I would like to try and give everything. Other bits of advice, try and, when you're building a portfolio, you need to have a strong power team around you. And by power team, I mean people that will help you, for example, solicitors, accountants, mortgage brokers, tradespeople, and try and make sure that all these people that you have around you are involved in property. If you use an accountant that's not involved in property and they don't understand what you're doing, you may as well ask the postman about how to deal with your finances, because they just won't have any idea. Likewise with solicitors, again, a lot of letting agents don't actually rent out their own properties, and so all they can see is things from the tenant's point of view. They will never understand things from the landlord's point of view. As I said before, another thing for people that haven't started is, most important thing is start now, because the longer you leave it, the more you're losing out on. And also to keep things simple. A lot of people have very, very complex business plans and strategies for either buying properties or funding properties. And although you may understand that complex strategy yourself, there will be times you've got to explain it to other people who won't understand it, and because of that will not be able to help you. So try and keep things as simple as you can.
That was a very comprehensive answer. I think you covered on some really great points. So keep your life in balance between the business and the other aspects of it. Get a great power team in place that are property specialists. Start now, because as the old saying goes, how does the old saying go? Don't wait to buy property and wait.
Yeah. That's very good. I've never heard that before.
You've never heard that before? Oh, first time for everything, Bill. Worthwhile coming on here now, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And finally, keep things simple, which is a great rule in life and in business. I want to say thank you to you, Bill McWilliam, for joining us today, and for being an inspiration, and letting the rest of us who were still plebbing it at the time know what was possible, even before we knew that we knew what was possible. So, just to also invite anyone watching or listening with a portfolio where you're either looking to go into a limited company, it is worth speaking with a specialist about that, and Bill McWilliam is a specialist. So thank you, Bill. Thank you for watching and listening, and I will see you all again next week. Bye for now.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Thank you.